Welcome to another episode of Entertainment Talk with Claypool, where we bring in guests and celebrities from the entertainment world in film, television, and music. Today's episode, we have an exciting guest, a very talented guest, Jennifer Hutchins. She is a producer, she's a writer, she has been awarded many awards. She's just very successful in her career path in the entertainment world. So everybody, please welcome Jennifer Hutchins. Jennifer, welcome to the show.
Hey, Clay. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm delighted to finally have you on the show and actually finally be able to talk to you in person because it took us a while to get you booked because of, you are just a busy woman. And I tell you what, you are a hard working woman because you have such a long just resume of things that you have done and produced. I mean, you've got, I think, somewhere between 75 and 100 projects that you have been involved in. So, if you don't mind, what I like for my listeners and viewers is to kind of get an understanding of how you get started in your field, because you're very talented, multifaceted in very different areas, but your main strength is in being a producer. So how did you get started in this career path? Was it something you did in high school? Was it a dream of yours from the beginning? Share a little bit with us.
Sure. I think everybody's path is completely different, so there's no right or wrong answer, if you are interested in producing. But my path started in Michigan in the Midwest. I got my degree in broadcast journalism. And with that came storytelling, writing. I always had an interest in speaking with people. People seem to reveal their stories to me naturally. And I started in news at CBS in Michigan and quickly realized I didn't like the politics of news and went to Hollywood. And I thought I would end up more in fluff journalism, went to E! Entertainment, was telling stories about fashion. And 9/11 happened. And everybody sort of shifted and froze and sort of was figuring out what they were going to do. And I met a producer who was more in live shows, and he had done some reality shows. Nowadays, we call those types of reality shows verite.
Oh, interesting.
I
haven't heard that term before.
There's been a difference or a split in what's happened. I ended up jumping into what at the time what was called reality shows, but now we would like to call it verite, meaning verite is more documentary type follow TV series.
Okay.
And reality, weirdly enough, is more scripted and influenced. And so those of us from the journalism era, some of us try to avoid the forced storytelling. So that's why I always try to define right off of the bat. The stories that I told were following a real person's life, in the moment. And, how do we put that together in, 40 minutes per episode?
So in the reality versus verite. So in realities, you said that, because I think this is interesting for viewers and listeners, is that reality is a lot of times people, think that it's actually, this is just all natural, but there is script added to these reality shows or direction given from directors of what they want to see and hear. And so there's, basically some direction for improv. Is that how they kind of operate?
Yeah, there's quite a few shows that if you're watching the show, there's definitely producer influence. This is not how people are naturally acting. If there's a lot of fighting and drama between the
if there's not drama, the show is not going to be a success. There has to be drama.
Yeah, most likely there's been producer influence and editing influence and all sorts of things. And in the beginning stages of my career, I didn't understand why we had things like that in the releases, that we have the right to change things and edit. People would look at that in the release and go, well, why would you change what I have to say? And I'm like, we wouldn't. That's for those other shows.
Right.
So the story, okay, so to understand what I'm saying is one of the most real shows I ever produced was Chris Angel Mind Freak, following a magician and his real life. as he's facing the hardships and struggles of that he actually might die from the illusions that he's setting up in the middle of public. We didn't influence his emotions. We didn't influence his family reactions. We didn't influence what happened in the middle of public. We just followed it with cameras, and we were really good at what we did.
That makes it very, very natural, and that's really true reality in my view. Is that show, is it still, I don't really know, but is that show still airing or streaming, or is that no longer,
No,
or is
it
it available
was.
on, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I mean, I'm sure you can get it in places. The heyday of that show was 2005 to 10. It
Okay.
was the highest ratings A&E had ever seen. We were second to soccer in Latin America. We had billboards in the middle of Times Square,
Really?
Hollywood Boulevard. We were a global sensation. To date, there's over 1 billion views. It was a big deal. He was
Wow.
the first
Congratulations.
Thank you. He was the first magician to ever get his own series. Up until then, magicians had had one-off specials. Nobody ever
Right.
thought that somebody could pull off enough magic to be able to produce a series. And by no means was it just me involved in pulling this off. I was, one of, uh, you know, 5 to 10 producers at any given point. There
Right.
was
It
the producer that.
takes a team for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, for each episode, we were shooting something like 20 magic tricks. So when you look at over 100 episodes, I mean, we had thousands of magic tricks that were shot.
Wow. Sounds like a very interesting project. And so I assume that you know a few magic tricks now from the years of doing that.
Yeah, I know a few. I mean, it's like any art, though. I mean, these guys, a lot of them start in their childhood just fiddling around with stuff, and they become
Yep.
very good at it. And sleight of hand and various other things. There's a lot of performance-ship in it, and
Right.
many of us behind the scenes would try to pull some stuff off and realize very quickly how hard it was. So. It was definitely something you couldn't just walk into and be good at.
Yeah. And like you said, a lot of musicians or magicians start, when they're younger. And that's why, in the start of our conversation here is, whether this was something that you started in, at an early age, because as a producer, you have a gift, a talent, an interest to create. So you're a creator in a sense. So that's where I was kind of curious if there was that you know creativity from early years of your life.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so the way that documentary storytelling exists is that we still determine beats of what's going to be in an episode. What is going to happen in real life that
Right.
might encompass stakes, and how are we going to shoot that? So we'd have very detailed outlines that would go back and forth with the network. On any of the, I mean, at this point, I've done probably over 1,000 episodes of television, and
Wow.
when something is green lit, we go through very detailed outlines of what each episode might look like so that we can plan and schedule it and, hit the real moments that are going to happen in the person's life and figure out how, predict how that would come together as an episode. And then we see what we get. So, it might shift as we're filming and we're, reacting to that moment. And then there's another set of storytelling that happens once you're in the edit bay and you see what you actually got and how is that
Right.
all going to come together, and is it going to be one-off episodes, or are these episodes going to go with each other throughout a whole season? So,
Interesting. The so the Angel Mind Freak. You have some others here that are pretty successful series. Is Ghost Hunters International on Sci-Fi, and also the Car Show on Fox Sports. Could you share a little bit about those productions that you were, very much involved in?
yeah, so Ghost Hunters International, it's interesting because it's history meets ghost stories, and my job was to identify the most intriguing ghost stories around the world. And we had a map of the world in our office, and there was just two of us for the international unit. And we would come in sometimes, depending on where in the world we were looking, we'd come in at 2 in the morning sometimes if we were focused on Europe, so we could hit the European hours. But it was fun because we would mark out like where are the ghost hunters going to go for this season, and we would start to pin various countries as with the stories as we came up with them, and see if we saw a pattern, like a bunch of stories happening in Romania or a bunch of stories happening in Ireland, and then we'd sort of hone in on it.
So how did you? And pardon me for interrupting, but I have questions. I just kind of, you know, cut in. But how do you hear about ghost stories? I mean, how do you even come across ghost stories? I guess you have to be
Yeah.
kind of. I guess if you're searching for something, you'll find it. It's kind of like, if you get involved in a business or a career or something like that, you start learning more about it. But is that the way? I mean, you look online. Is that where you find ghost stories?
Yeah, I was researching online, researching history. If there was a very brutal historic story, usually somewhere in the vicinity of that, the locals would have some sort of ghost story. We knew as producers, if there's a high energy, something that has happened in history, people they'll be talking about it, and naturally ghost stories will occur. So places in that had a lot of battle, a lot of death, brutal kings and queens, and stories of
Right.
black widows. I think the way really was to start with history. One of the
Interesting.
more popular stories I did was I just simply started by looking at Hitler's ghost and seeing what people were saying around the world, because that's one of the most famous people that we
Sure.
talk about in history. But what happens when you start researching Hitler's ghost? Well, I found a guy who had written a book in Florida, claiming that he had final letters that Hitler's right hand man, head of security, had written and gave to him, and said, "You can publish these when I die." And it was a very detailed account of how Hitler had body doubles, and they thought if somebody was ever coming after Hitler, they would just sub him out with a body double. And it was a detailed account about how, when the Russians were coming, his own people drugged him, forced him to escape the country, to Portugal, put him on a U-boat, and took him to Argentina, where a lot of the Nazis were escaping. And I thought, this story is insane. Let's just follow
Right.
it.
It's very
So
interesting.
I hired a local producer in Argentina to continue the trail of the story. And the story takes us to this little town called Miramar, where apparently, according to the book, they had hid Hitler. So I send the local producer to this little town of Miramar to interview the locals. Most were dead, a few elderly were left. And sure enough, they did go along, or they did talk about stuff that was written in the book, that the town had sort of witnessed all these black cars arrive to this hotel, and nobody was allowed to come in or out. It was like the fanciest hotel in town, and they would see what looked like Hitler walking around the grounds every so often. So
Wow.
the story panned out. So it was at that point that I pitched it. I think that we should do this story for Ghost Hunters International. And I had so many things to back it up with, as crazy as it sounds, but let's go looking for Hitler's ghost in this town of Miramar. And sure enough, we did. And we flew the guy that wrote the book to our studios in LA and interviewed him too.
Interesting. So that's definitely I would say a golden nugget for people because that's a story that I don't think anybody has heard, but that's very interesting. So you got my curiosity up here. So um, because a lot of people are interested in the spiritual realm, the life after death, stuff like that. So personally, being involved in this show, did you have any encounters of any ghost?
Yeah, I didn't travel with that show. I booked it from
Oh, okay.
afar. But I did travel with two other ghost shows that I produced. One was called Haunted Collector, the other was called Trending Fear. Haunted Collector was also on Sci Fi Channel. It followed John Zaffis, who's the world leading authority on demonology. And his aunt is
Interesting.
Lorraine Warren, who became very famous for the movie that was about her. I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but it followed that show followed him and his family as they traveled the country, um, uh, being called in for people that were having problems with ghosts in their home or business. And he also was known for having a museum of haunted items. And
Wow.
it's so known within the ghost world that people will mail him very creepy things that they say are haunted and please get rid of this sort of thing. So it was when we were traveling with that show. I had heard voices a few times. I had been slimed, and
What?
just
You've been
heard some
slimed?
Yeah, yeah. I know that one was a little bit weirder. It's not as cool as you think when I start to unravel the story here. But we were at a place in Mississippi. It was right at the beginning of Natchez Trace, where back in the day, 200 years prior, people would get off of their boats. They would go to stay at this inn to recover. Maybe they had illness. Maybe they just needed to sleep. Maybe they just wanted to drink. So there was a lot of history there, a lot of deaths, a lot of people that had fought each other, whatever may have happened at this tavern. Fast forward, this tavern is now a restaurant and a event center, a very
Right.
old stone building, a few stories high, and it had all kinds of ghost stories, relating to the history of the building. And one of the weirder stories that the wait staff, because the bottom part's a restaurant, they said they would be setting up tables and this weird clear slime would just come out of nowhere, out of the ceiling, out of a table, just anywhere where no pipes existed.
That's
Just made no
interesting.
sense. And I thought the story was so bizarre, we might not even end up using it. I'm like, surely there's a way to explain that one. I don't know. But we were setting up to film, and we were in a back area, and we'd shut off all the lights, and we still had our little light on in the back area. I had my
Right.
three monitors. One monitor went to each camera, and I'm sitting here waiting, ready to go. And there's some producers standing up behind me, and then I realize all of a sudden my leg is wet. I'm like, why is my leg wet? I don't even have anything to drink. I have a metal table here with my, monitors sitting on it. And then there's like a pool of liquid next to my leg on the floor too. And I look behind me, I'm like, does anybody have something to drink? Did somebody just spill something on me? And nobody had anything. So we couldn't figure out where this weird wetness had just come out of nowhere. I mean, we looked, and we're like,
Yeah.
wait, is this the slime story? Did I just get slimed?
So in the film Ghostbusters, they get the sliming takes place. So I wonder if from in that film that's based upon actuality, of things that have happened because definitely has happened to you. It sounds like.
We never could explain it, and there, with the ghost hunting stuff, they have these special devices that can hear audio that you can't necessarily hear, and they ask
Right.
questions, and then they play it back, and then you like hear the shh, and then you might hear like a little something in there. Um, we were in a broken down insane asylum that was something like 30,000 square feet of just creepiness now. Like the windows had been broken out. The place hadn't been open in like 10 years in Virginia. And we're standing in the old women's ward, and they were asking questions with one of those devices. What happened here? Did something happen to you? And then they were getting nothing. They started asking questions towards a nurse. Did something happen to you? And just nothing. And so I whisper over to the guys, I'm like, ask questions towards a male nurse. For some reason I just got a creepy vibe about that. And so they start asking questions to a male nurse in the women's ward. And all of a sudden, clear as day, I mean, we're standing across the hallway from them, just me and the audio guy, and they've got one camera guy just on two people
Right.
asking questions. Clear as day, we hear the memories. It said the
It's they
memories.
said
Just
what? What was it again?
it's there was a voice that said the memories. And it
The
was the
memory.
creepiest, it was like satisfied. like the memories, like it was so satisfied by some very horrible memory is the feeling that we all got. And all of us, I mean, just the hair stood up everywhere, and all of us looked at each other like, did that just happen? You
Did
know,
you hear that? Wow.
so, there's a handful of things like
No
that we
kidding. I
just,
mean, I think we could do a show talking about just this show because that's
oh,
very interesting. Um, so I got to. So now again, my curiosity is going all over the place. But so in doing this show on ghost stories, so here in the U.S., we've had the Civil War, we've had major disasters, we've had just things that where there's been a lot of lives taken for various reasons. So anything related to Civil War or anything related to American history that might be interesting for our viewers and listeners?
when we started doing that show, Ghost Hunters Domestic had really covered the obvious places to go, like, where there was major battles and history. So by the time we were producing the show, we were sort of looking for more off the beaten path nuggets
Okay.
that people didn't necessarily know and times of history to really connect to. A lot of it was homeowner driven. So, we
Ah,
the, it was the homeowner calling in the team to help them. So you would go to some small town. A lot of these things happen in Ohio for some reason, but you would go to you'd go to this person's house, you would hear their story, they would give you a tour, they would say, here's the things that are happening. And then as a team, we would sort of split off to try to figure out if we could get to the bottom of it. It felt very Scooby-Doo-ish. There was times where I was in historic archives, flipping through old maps and town history and old newspapers, trying
right.
to see if anything had happened around the land or the property of the people. Sometimes they'd heard voices that said very specific things. Sometimes there were items that they said did weird things. So we would take those items to an antique store and get a background of the item. So it was a lot of history and research meets, what's happening to this person.
Interesting. It's a lot of investigative work to even begin to get to the stage of filming for a show, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, in Puerto Rico, we had a homeowner that's, claimed to have an extremely horrible haunting, and they believed it to be related to coconuts that were in their yard
Coconut.
that were buried. They were buried halfway through the yard, and they were filled with all these items like chicken bones and human hair, and they were very specifically dressed coconuts. And I spent 2 weeks in Puerto Rico with a local that was helping me translate to speak with people. I speak Spanish a little bit, but not perfect. And
Right.
we were in this little town of Guayarma on the other side of the island, and they have the most Santeria chapels out of anywhere. There's something like over 100 Santeria chapels, and coconuts are very prominent in sort of occult lore. And
Hmm.
people can put a voodoo curse on somebody with chicken bones and various things. So it gets very scary when you get into that realm, and people take it very seriously. So we had searched high and dry to find the most renowned santero in Puerto Rico to come assess what had happened to their house with these coconuts, and then
Right.
hopefully, clear the place out for them. So whenever we did this, we would send the homeowners to a hotel. Like, go have a vacation on us while we figure out what is going on here. And so we brought the Santero over to this house, and the woman who lived at the house, she had decided to come back to her house and grab something right at that moment when we had the Santero there. And turns out they knew each other. And she did not like him. She thought he was evil. And all of a sudden has a complete meltdown. This is off
Oh,
camera behind the scenes. Why do you have this evil Santero at my house? And we're like, oh no, this is not good. We had no idea that she she and him had a backstory. And
Right.
so some really interesting stuff ensued off camera of us trying to figure out what we were going to do to help this woman, because that was not going to work.
Have you discovered the Toasted Yolk Cafe located at 14105 Ronald Reagan Boulevard in Cedar Park, Texas? Well, if you haven't, I would encourage you to come out and try our featured favorite Eggs Benedicts that we call the Arnolds. One of our favorites is the Southern Fried Arnold. Comes with 2 biscuit halves topped with 2 hand-battered chicken tenders, 2 poached eggs, and covered with country sausage gravy. Or try the West Coast Arnold. It is 2 English muffin halves topped with Cajun turkey, bacon, tomato, guacamole, 2 poached eggs, and topped with Cholula Ranch sauce. Or try the Alaskan Arnold. It's 2 English muffin halves topped with salmon, spinach, 2 poached eggs, and hollandaise sauce. And if that doesn't entice you, try our Southwestern Arnold. It comes with 2 English muffin halves topped with sausage, onion, jalapenos, 2 poached eggs, and queso sauce. And last but not least, the Classic Arnold, formerly known as the Benedict. It is 2 English muffin halves topped with Canadian bacon, 2 poached eggs, and hollandaise sauce. All of our Arnolds are served as a pair with your choice of hash brown casserole or grits. The Toasted Yolk Cafe at 14105 Ronald Reagan Boulevard in Cedar Park, Texas, where our slogan is, "It's never too early to get toasted at the Toasted Yolk Cafe." Well, this is very interesting on this show, but I kind of want to move to some of your other productions you've been involved in, because again, we could make a show just out of the history of your stories on these ghosts. So another one is the car show on Fox Sports that you were involved in, and then also the that animal rescue show, which I think is more a recent production. So could you share a little bit about those 2 productions? For those viewers and listeners that are not familiar with either of those shows, but both are very successful.
Yeah. So the car show with Adam Carolla, it was greenlit for Speed Channel, and Speed Channel is now Fox Sports. And it was Adam and 3 of his buddies who are car enthusiasts. Matt Farah, he has very popular blog, podcast, very respected in the supercar world as an authority. Dan Neal, the only Pulitzer Prize winning auto journalist at the time, and John Sally, a car enthusiast basketball player. And so these 2 would get all these every major supercar in the world for the show, and then and go take them out in some sort of outing. So, for example, we had
They put them out on a track, or to just take them out across the country.
The sky was the limit for us to all figure out what the creative was here. So we would sit there in development and say, okay, here's the world of supercars. What would be interesting for the car enthusiasts? Because you have to know your audience with these shows. And Speed Channel has a very intelligent car enthusiast audience. So you cannot dumbify a car show for this audience. They will call you out on it. You really got to know what you're talking about. So we had the writing and the dialogue had to be very intelligent for the audience. But the segments could be funny, because Adam's funny and people like Adam for that reason. So we took a Maybach supercar and a Rolls Royce, and we took it out on the racetrack, and we put a tattoo artist in the back seat of each car, putting a tattoo of the car show on just a random person's arm, while each of the hosts tried to drive as steadily but as fast as possible around the racetrack.
Okay, I would not want to be the person getting the tattoo at that time.
I don't know how we found these people to agree to do this, but
you probably paid them good.
But it was interesting also to see, what was the steadier car around the racetrack, but that could also go faster, while you've got something so detailed happening in the back seat.
Yeah. I guess what was the best tattoo?
It was the Rolls Royce.
Yeah.
The Rolls Royce. So we had the awful job though as a production team. We would talk to the press car companies and say, here's what we need, here's what we think the creative is going to be, here's the date we need the car. And they were more than happy to send us the press cars. Most car companies have a press unit where they send it out to the automotive journalists or the TV
Right.
shows to highlight those cars. So these cars just circulate. And so at any given point, we were getting 5 to 10 supercars dropped off at our production office because they weren't going to take it out of their way. So we have now 10 supercars, like a few $1 million worth of cars in our
Right.
lot that each of us had the task of figuring out, well, which one of us is going to drive which car to the racetrack.
Oh, or you. Sounds like
Poor us. I mean,
not a hard decision, because pretty much any one of them would have been pure much joy. So,
yeah, I mean, there was a time when I got a nearly $300,000 Lexus stuck in the sand on the way to the racetrack because I had to
oh no.
pull over to answer a text message, and it was just sand on either side of the road. And actually, not answer a text message. I think I was lost, and I needed to look at my map. And
Okay.
all of a sudden, I realized the car was so heavy I couldn't get it out. Luckily, the old Michigan days came back into memory of, bring it forward and backwards, just like snow, and then
Yeah.
go out and kick the sand a little bit to create a barrier. And I got it out, but I was like, oh no, did I just get the supercar stuck in the sand in the desert?
Yeah, I know a
It's
friend that
awesome.
got a car stuck in sand, and it's not an easy task to get it out. And it almost turns into like quicksand, because sometimes you can actually just make it worse instead of making it better. But very interesting. So how about the animal rescue show? So, or I'm sorry, that animal rescue show. Tell us a little bit about that show. What is its storyline, its plot, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, that animal rescue show, it was interesting because I I started a network called Austin Entertainment Business, which eventually grew into All Entertainment Business, as a way to connect people in the entertainment business and
Right.
help media professionals level up, just teach them things about the entertainment business. And all of a sudden, I started getting random phone calls of, you've been recommended as a producer for this or that. And I think it was through the network, just because I'd been guest speaking through my own network. And this
Right.
was one of those times. I got what I think was a random call saying, you've been recommended to produce this show about animals. And can we talk to you? So I ended up on a phone call with a woman named Naima Raza from New York and Bill Gutentag from San Francisco, and both producers. And Bill is going to be a director on this. And they're talking to me about this animal rescue series. CBS All Access has picked up 10 episodes. And at first it's an interview, and then it's are you interested in this? And I'm thinking, oh yeah, this would be great. And at the time, I was solely a creative producer. Every show up until then, for over a decade, I get hired as a creative producer to come up with, what's the episode going to look like. Sometimes I'm doing casting,
Okay.
locations, just the whole gamut of things. In nonfiction, that's usually what the producer does. And sometimes you're directing. I mean, there's been times where I've directed Louis Anderson and Kevin Farley in a reality episode, and that's not unheard of, that we don't have a director, but the producer's directing. So in this case, I'm like, yeah, this sounds great. And then they start asking some questions about money. And I'm like, why are they asking me questions about money or how much I think this would cost? And I said, are you guys looking for a line producer? And they said, yeah, a creative line producer. I'm like, a creative line producer? Um,
Hmm.
Usually line producer is the one that handles the budget and all the numbers.
Okay.
And I was like, this is interesting. And then they revealed to me that Richard Linkletter is a director on this as well. And I, at this point, I'd moved out to Austin. I'd been out in Austin for a few years, and I'd been wanting to work with Richard. He's, one of the greats that live out in Austin. Him and
Yeah.
Robert Rodriguez and Terrence Malick lives in Texas. You definitely know who the players are.
Yeah. Isn't he the founder and of the Austin Film Society, I think?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
Austin Film Society was really something that organized Austin and really put it on the map. It was founded by Richard Linkletter and Robert
Yep.
Rodriguez and Elizabeth Avian, Robert Rodriguez's ex-wife and partner, Troublemaker Studios. They really organized all the indie filmmakers of Austin and put it on the map. So, anyways, when that name was dropped, I was like, I can do anything. So, yes, absolutely, I can be a what do you say, creative line producer,
Right.
and
Whatever you want to call it.
hung up the phone and called a bunch of my line producer buddies from previous shows, and I was like, "Have you ever heard of a creative line producer?" And they were like, "That's an interesting way to put it." Maybe a lot of them, the people I was talking to on this series, they had come from the film world,
Yeah.
and I also had come from film, and we haven't talked about my film world yet, but I think they liked the combination of reality verite documentary type series stuff meets film, because now we have a bunch of film people that are about to make a verite series, and basically it
Okay.
was 10 episodes, all about some form of animal rescue. And we would need to hire everybody and then identify the stories and get the stories greenlit and then, move forward into production. So it was, I have to say, it was one of my favorite shows to work on, because the stories as they progressed, it wasn't just about a story of animal rescue, like a pig rescue place or a wildlife rescue
Yeah.
or an animal shelter rescue. The directors, Bill Gutentag and Richard Linklater, were very good at also identifying the human element of the story. And what you found when you ended up watching these half-hour episodes is it was really about the animal rescuing the human. And when you start to deliver these shows to the network, in this case, we had Dr. Phil's production company, Stage 32. We had CBS All Access Studio. We had CBS Studio. So we had three major entities that were all chiming in on notes as we go back and forth to lock the episode. Legal team,
Right.
music team, producer teams. And I've never had this happen where the notes start to come back and everybody goes, wow, that was beautiful. Now that the tears have dried, here's my notes. It
Wow.
was just such a neat process to work through with everybody. Everybody just fell in love with it instantly.
So in the animal rescue show is the humanity side is. Did you find that? I mean, when you're just discovering the rescue of the animals, that the story was that um, because of some life experiences with the owner or the caretaker of the animals, something in their personal life, as that's could transpire in the basically mistreatment of the animal. Is that kind of some of the findings that you had in the show?
Uh, no, not necessarily.
Okay.
The Austin Wildlife Center, for example, we followed these women that were. You never knew what the day was going to be or what would progress. A litter of baby squirrels dropped off on their doorstep. That were near death's door, and they had to
Right.
revive them. A coyote with a missing leg, is it going to die, is it not? A bird with a broken wing, will it die, will it get fixed?
Okay.
But then as we get to know them and the things that they're going through with these poor animals, we realize, like, why did they get into this business in the first place?
Yeah.
And we find out from one of the main women that her father had cancer, and she would bring home animals, and it made him feel better. And
Yeah.
and we start to hear, the story of animals in relation just to human importance, while also seeing what's happening with the animal as it's progressing through the story. And will the animal make it or be released back into the wild?
Yeah. The what was I going to say? So I own a restaurant, and so with our restaurant, people do come in with pets that are what's the title when they're when a pet is a comfort. I don't forget the title, but um, these animals bring so much joy and comfort and peace into people's lives, And the other
Yeah.
thing I want to make a comment on is that I've seen, and this is part of, I guess, technology and how we've advanced, is just, you mentioned a coyote without a leg, and I've seen different things where, a dog, they were basically paralyzed, on the back half of their body, or they had a front legs missing, and now with technology, they're making basically, artificial limbs and different mobility instruments for pets, and you can just see the joy of the animal, just like, they've just like get this energy of life coming back to them. So you have any encounters like that on your show?
Yeah, there was a woman who has a rescue farm in northern Austin, and she takes the
Hmm.
permanently injured animals that nobody else wants. She's got two blind horses.
Right.
Each one of them can see out of this eye or this eye. And what's interesting is they stand next to each other head to head and they walk around. We did a story of
Oh, wow.
a little puppy that had no paws. It was born with no paws, and it was really
Yeah.
painful. It would bleed when it tried to walk, and
Oh, yeah.
so upon in the episode we meet all the animals that she has. She's got a rooster with a clawed hand, and she would have like a little boy come over with also a mangled hand and meet the rooster with the clawed hand, and they would bond. Or she'd have a blind kid come meet
Oh,
the blind horses. And it was a very like healing farm.
yeah. Those are very heartfelt stories.
Yeah, and we followed the story of the little puppy going to the vet, and they basically it was getting fitted for these shoes that so it could walk again without forcing its paws to bleed or lack
Right.
of paws. So towards the end of the episode, you get to actually see that puppy run across with its new shoes on.
I want to ask you too, is, so as we're doing this interview, behind you, I see about, close to half a dozen awards. So, could you tell us a little bit about the awards that you have received over the course of your career? Because that shows some great recognition for your work, and I know that anybody that receives awards in the film and television and music industries, it's a great achievement. So, could you share a little bit about those awards behind you?
Yeah, the let me just remind myself. Okay. Most
Those
of
aren't
the
real. They're not just bookmarkers, are they?
no, they're real.
Okay.
Most of them were for the Chris Angel Mind Freak series, and
Oh, okay.
another one on the end is for a show called The Imploders. The Chris Angel Mind Freak series, over the course of over 100 episodes, we ended up with over a billion eyeballs on that show, and we were second to
What?
soccer in Latin America. It was a big thing. When we would go to film, the fans were so vast that people would camp out for days if they knew where we were going to film, and thousands of people would show up. I mean, it was a
Interesting.
phenomenon. It was a thing, and people's the episode. I think we were one of the first to break the fourth wall in filming in such a way where to help the audience know that this is not just a camera trick.
Right.
So we're following the action that happens. We can't possibly have time to get the sound guy out of the shot or the other camera guy out of the shot. And there was very purposeful decisions that were made in that. At first, people thought it was just sloppy filming, but it helped the audience feel like that they were there.
Yeah.
Because how can you do a camera trick if you can't even get the sound guy out of the shot?
Right.
So it got a lot of recognition after that. I grew up on that show. I started as a production assistant and worked my way up to a post coordinator, and then an associate producer, a segment producer, a field producer, a senior producer, and then a show. I was show running a lot of the episodes. We actually won a Guinness World Record of the most people to vanish.
What?
We broke, yeah, we over 100 people vanished at once. Um, we did a
No,
magic
no
trick
camera
that at the
trick.
time. No, no. And we had Guinness there. I mean, Guinness flew in to, make, and that's how you get a Guinness record. They have to be there and see it, and then they
Right.
officiate it and say, okay, this is a legitimate Guinness. And we did a magic trick that nobody to date had done the way that we had done it. To me, this is my favorite trick of all time. If you Google it at some point, I think it's called Bodies Pulled Apart with Chris Angel. But we went to a park. He saw some random people walking around the grass and said, come over here, come over here. And he got two of the people volunteered to participate. He laid them down on park benches across from each other and hypnotized them. And he had people stand at either end of their arms and legs. And when they were
Right.
hypnotized, he pushed on their stomach and said, pull. And as the people pulled, the body of the person split apart and her top started running across the park and her legs started walking the other direction. And then he did the same to the guy, pull, and the body pulled apart. And his top part was, sort of walking and his legs were dangling. And the people that watched this thing, one woman almost passed out. I mean, they just fell backwards. And then in the confusion of it, he picked up the girl who was crawling across the grass and put her on the legs, and he picked up the guy and put him on the legs, and then he woke them up. And as they stand up, you realize he put the tops on the wrong bottoms. So now the top of the guy is on the girl's
woman.
bottom, and vice versa. And she was wearing a long skirt, and he had been wearing pants. And so, anyways, that was one of my favorite ones of all
I
time.
am definitely going to look that up because that sounds extremely interesting. It also sounds like it actually should have been on the Ghost Show because it's bizarre.
What's interesting about producing magic is just seeing what's behind the curtain and what influences people as individuals and people as audiences. And it's never what you would think. And I think that a lot of these methods politicians use too. I think if you want to know how politics works, you should learn magic.
Interesting. That's a great insight.
It's the art of manipulation.
Yes, definitely.
Look over
So
here.
our show is going to be wrapping up here in a little bit, but I wanted to ask some more about. So this is very well known in the greater Austria, definitely in Texas, across the nation is your all entertainment business. Could you share a little bit about that because it's been a very successful organization? Definitely well known here in Austin, and definitely as Austin continues to grow in the film and television industry, because Austin is the number one location in all of Texas when it comes to the film and television industry. It's also, I think we have probably at least 4 brand new studios being built in the greater metropolitan area. So tell us a little bit about All Entertainment Business and, how it got started, how long it's been going on, and, just for our viewers and listeners to, draw some, attention to that.
Yeah. Well, I've been working nonstop for almost 2 decades, so I've learned a few things, right? And I
Right.
moved here to Austin, and it felt like a lot of people were living in bubbles. You had the film people, the television people, the commercial branded content people, and then some miscellaneous. It didn't really feel very connective. And
Right.
so I built Austin Entertainment Business as a way to connect the community. That was the original intent. And how do we do that? My annoyance of showing up to a networking group is I usually show up when I'm out of work, and then I meet other people out of work, and then I get disappointed when nothing
Yeah.
happens out of that. Or or maybe I just only show up once in a great while and then just get disappointed. You talk to the random person that doesn't really relate to what you're trying to achieve. And so I wanted to build something that could set people up for better success, whether it's breaking
Yeah.
the ice or meeting the person that you want to know, or drawing in the people that are working. So Austin Entertainment Business was formed as a way to help all media type pros, whether it's television, film, branded content, level up. And inviting high profile guest speakers that I would like to know, that I'm assuming a lot of other people would like to know
Absolutely.
as well. And get up on stage and not just share high level stories, but, share like, how did you do it? How did you get from point 1 to 2 to 3 to 4? I feel like a lot of times when people are guest speaking, they're talking so high level. Like, I went and saw James Cameron speak at the Produced By conference one year, and it was like, it's great to hear your stories up here, but like, I don't know
Right.
how to get there. It feels so far disconnected.
Yeah.
So I really focused, from my broadcast journalism days and the interviews with the guests, of how do I get out of these people, let's get from square one and tell me the mistakes and tell me the things that worked. And maybe I can take little nuggets out of that for my own journey, but also emphasizing to people like, look, what these people say on stage isn't necessarily the path that's going to get you there,
Right.
but it's good that you're listening to all this stuff and you can take or leave things as they're coming. So the guest speakers, draw in the audience, whether they're working or not, because they just want to hear, so-and-so talk.
Yep.
And then also I added an open mic to the format where people in the audience can introduce themselves to each other.
The open mic is at the beginning, and then you go into your guest speaker.
Yeah. So
Okay.
it's a way to break the ice, but really to know who's in the audience. But I also help people with it a bit. All of us have this tendency to be too generic on, hi, I'm Jen, I'm a producer. Nice to meet you. Hire me. It's by the time the next person gets up, that's sort of forgotten. So it's like, help me like start a conversation with you. Tell me something I can grab onto and ask you a question.
Yeah.
So, it's helping people brand themselves a little bit. Tell me about what you're working on right now. I'm really excited to be working on a feature film about mental health because I would like to shine a light on bipolar. It's got a 2-time Oscar-winning director, and it's the entire thing was put together with home video footage. And that's a true story. That's what I'm doing right now. But that's way more interesting, right, than me just getting up on the microphone and saying, "Hi, I'm Jen. I'm a producer." So, anyways, that has helped people get to know each other.
All entertainment business, I think that what you have put together is so needed in not just Austin, but I moved from the Houston, Texas area a couple years ago, lived there for a couple decades, and the same need is there, where you have these different get-togethers or these different groups, and it really needs to be all funneled into one. And with all entertainment business, in my interpretation and insight that I have of it is that's the perfect way of developing that. So I don't care what facet of the industry you're in, it's a great organization to come to. And it's not so this all entertainment business is a once a month event. It's you can be in person or it streams live every month as well, correct?
Yeah. I when the pandemic happened, I was like, well, sort of game on to invite all my friends from LA and New York to chime in.
Yep.
I'd been living and working in LA for almost 2 decades. So I had amassed a giant list of industry people, lots of producers, lots of directors, lots of actors. And so I just invited them all to chime in as well. So this is not a generic group. This is people that are working in the industry. And I think people see it when they show up. Sometimes
Yeah.
you show up to entertainment networking groups and it feels like a lot of hobbyists. These are not hobbyists. These are people that get insulted when people go, "Oh, you still working in that entertainment business?"
Yeah.
And it's like, "You still working in that engineer business?"
Yeah.
Like we're not hobbyists here. These are people that know how to start a building, or it's the equivalent to starting a business.
Exactly, because this is, like I said, this is, it's people that are basically well seasoned, successful, but it's also those, and that's, the purpose of All Entertainment Group, and the purpose of this show is what they can learn from you as those golden nuggets of how you got started, and things that you've learned. But There's a saying there's a million ways to make $1,000,000. Well, I think there's a million pathways to the success in the film, television, music industries. And one of probably the things that most people learn is it's all about networking, and all entertainment business is a great networking tool. So I would encourage listeners, viewers, that you connect with all entertainment business via in person if you happen to live in the greater Austin area, or via their streaming show every month. And I believe you have an app out now, right? All entertainment app of some sort.
Yeah, it's just app.allentertainmentbusiness.com. It's a Rolodex
Okay.
of entertainment professionals. So you can sort
Yeah.
people by their job title, by their picture, and then you can save people to a private Rolodex too. So, it's
Yep.
just adding the photo element and the sort element. Because sometimes when I meet a makeup artist at a networking event, I'm not necessarily hiring one right now.
Right.
It sorts by city too. So if
Yep.
all of a sudden I'm crewing up for makeup art, for crew in Atlanta, I can sort like, who have I met before, that's in here as I'm starting off my process of hiring. So it was something that I wanted. And
A lot of people give out business cards, and nowadays with technology, and business cards are great. They're like, great sizzle cards, so to speak, but they also tend to get lost in the shuffle. So I just
yeah,
recently came across the app, and I'm planning on putting that app on my phone to start using it, because it'll help me with a lot of my organization as I come across more and more people in the industry, and I want to stay connected, but I don't want to have
yeah.
I don't want to have 1,000 business cards.
Yeah, I mean, at the bottom, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a referral based network, and I always go on my internal circle who I work with over and over again because we
Yep.
want to trust each other. But sometimes when I'm having to reach out, like nobody's available, or I need to find like an unknown actor because I'm crewing up for something maybe that's non-union, and we have an opportunity to give people a leg up. I will
Yep.
go in there and go to people that are not necessarily in my direct, Rolodex, and try to
Right.
find people. I've actually hired a lot of people through it and reminded myself of who I know. Because there's people I've heard, oh, that guy is a great gaffer, and I forget. And then
Yep.
I go back in there, I'm like, oh, yeah, that guy. Well, I did want to, test him out.
Yeah. I mean, you'll come across stuff that'll trigger memories in your mind. So, but Jennifer, I definitely appreciate you being on the show. We need to wrap up the show here, but we have not even touched a lot of your, multiple talents that you have, and we really didn't touch much on the film side. But I just want to definitely thank you for being on the show. You have shared some really great golden nuggets for our viewers and listeners. You have some very interesting stories, and hopefully that we can have you on the show again at another time, because I think that we could probably get 2 or 3 shows out of the stories you have. So for our viewers, for our listeners, always remember that great it is to dream the dream when you stand in youth by the starry stream. But greater it is to fight life through and say at the end, the dream is true. Keep pursuing your dreams, and we'll see you next time on Entertainment Talk with Claypool.